Joining us now is David Daley, former editor of Salon.com, the CEO of a new startup. Actually, we'll find out if it's a startup, in a news page in Connecticut, and author of a newly released book whose title we will convey with as much care yet clarity as possible. The book is frequently printed as, well, let's call it Rat F. It's frequently printed as Rat F : KED. That is the title. The subtitle is The True Story Behind the Secret Plan to Steal America's Democracy. Now, the word that's blanked out there is a word that generally means to have Congress, which leads us to the subject of the book, Dave Daley. First of all, thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me. It's great to talk, especially after how long you were writing with us at Salon. So this is a thrill.
Yeah, well, same here. And I am no longer with the Bernie Sanders campaign, so I'm a writer again. But anyway, so your book is about gerrymandering, but I think the thesis is a little broader than that. So let me have you state it, if you would.
Absolutely. What I am arguing in this book is that while gerrymandering has always existed in American politics, from 1790 all the way up till 2000, that was the horse and buggy era of gerrymandering. What the Republicans did in 2010 blasted this into the rocket ship era. It was the most effective gerrymander of all time. They redistricted state houses across the country, but also the House of Representatives in such a way as to build a firewall and to govern from the minority. It's extraordinarily dangerous. It is locked in until the next census after 2020, and it is the root cause of our broken, extreme, and dysfunctional politics. All of those Democrats who were on the House floor protesting gun control and the failure to get a vote on bills that the vast majority of the country approves in, they really should have been protesting redistricting, because that is why we can't get action on a wide array of issues that the American public desperately wants.
And I want to get back to that point, Dave Daley, but it became something of an election year tradition for me over the last 10 years I would always write the post-election piece. When it came to Congress, I would always say, I don't remember the exact numbers now, and Democrats won 2 million more votes nationwide for Congress and lost Congress by X number of seats. So obviously gerrymandering is behind that. That much I knew. What I did not know until your book came along was the extent to which this was really ramped up after the election of Barack Obama, and was, based on your book and your reporting, a very intentional or very deliberate response to the election of Barack Obama.
This is a specific program, and it was called REDMAP. This was called REDMAP for Redistricting Majority Project, and it was based at a group called the Republican State Leadership Committee, which was directed by former RNC Chairman Ed Gillespie and Chris Jankowski, its executive director. They had a eureka moment in 2009 when they were otherwise really, really depressed about losing to Barack Obama. This was the fourth of fifth elections in which the Republicans had lost the popular vote. There's a supermajority for the Democrats in the Senate, a majority in the House, and that the Republicans are looking at a looming demographic time bomb that threatened to make them a minority party nationwide. They realize, however, that actually the important election is 2010, because every 10 years we redistrict every legislative and congressional seat in the country after the census. And they start to think about it because these are state guys. They understand that redistricting happens at the state level. And they go, if we were to focus our resources on trying to flip legislative chambers in states where there's going to be a dramatic amount of redistricting, we could really have an impact. So they focus on Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, North Carolina, a bunch of other states, largely blue and purple states. And in many of these states, control of the state legislature is very, very tight. And with $30 million spread out, 100,000 here, 150,000 here, heading into state house local races, some of which the entire budget for a race like that might be less than six figures. And they swamp these races with outside advertising, largely negative. They defeat more than 95% of the candidates they target. They take dozens of legislative chambers coast to coast, and most importantly, they did so in a targeted way designed to be sure that in all of these states, the Democrats did not have a seat at the table when redistricting happened the following year. And they follow it up in 2011 with incredibly specific and genius map makers armed with the most modern advanced technologies and demographic detail, and they drew maps that they cannot lose on.
And they drew maps of incredible complexity, and in order to get the voters they want. I mean, I think one of them looked like a plate of lasagna being held by a syphilis spirochete. I mean, they're just incredibly, spidery things that, because you have some illustration. And so they did this, and this was, in your mind, essential to them regaining and holding Congress, or certainly holding Congress?
Absolutely. I mean, you just rattled off the numbers before. Democrats get 1.4 million more votes in 2012, which is the first election run on these new maps, and they only gained 7 seats, so they're still down 201, and the House becomes the center of obstruction to a re-elected president's second term, despite getting 1.4 million more votes for it. I mean, that's not chump change there. And if you go state by state, Ohio, 240,000 more votes for Democratic candidates. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. It doesn't matter. A lot more.
In Michigan, 240,000 more votes for Democratic candidates. That elects a delegation that's 9-5 Republican. Pennsylvania, 100,000 more votes for Democratic candidates than Republicans. That returns a delegation that is 13-5 Republican. Ohio splits just about 50-50. It gives a small margin to the Republicans, but they take 12 of the 16 seats. And this repeats itself in state after state. And it's the key to why the Republicans maintain control of Congress, or at least it's the key to why such extreme Republicans from the House Freedom Caucus arrive and they push the party in Congress further to the right than it's been at any time in our history. And that's a Harvard political science study.
All right, so let's talk about that for a second. I think that people have generally, agree that this gerrymandering has increased the Republican stranglehold on Congress, and arguably it might be one reason why Congress has become so incredibly unpopular now among voters, because it's not really reflecting the voters' will. Now, but I guess the question would be, you've also said that the polarization of Congress to a large extent is explainable by this, especially on the right. How is it that just because the Republicans have gerrymandered districts to their liking, that explains the rise of so many extremist Tea Party types in Congress?
Because we have 400 out of 435 districts in this country in which the general election is no longer competitive. It is fait accompli after the party primary. So the winner of the general election is the person essentially who represents the base of the party, the angriest base. And what you see in these Republican primaries is it's a race to the craziest. It's I'm really, really crazy. And it's, no, you're not. I am crazier than you. And that is the level of a debate in these districts. And they return candidates who are further to the right, and it elects them from districts in which they cannot lose. They become completely unaccountable. We have an unaccountable minority running the show.
So there are two aspects to it, I guess, that I take out of that. And we're talking with David Daley, author of the book Rat Effed, except fill in the F. I guess there are two things about that. One is if you're running in a district where you're guaranteed to win once you get the Republican nomination, you don't need to appeal to any swing voters. And I think
you don't need to talk to them at all.
Right.
We've lost the art of political persuasion. You don't have to do anything but appeal to the narrowest, most extreme aspects of your base.
Right, because they're the ones most likely to vote. So you've got that phenomenon going on, and of course, once they get in, they have the power of incumbency behind them. So I guess the question then becomes, okay, if this is the case, two questions. One, were the Republicans just, in their own ruthless and unethical way, smarter than the Democrats?
Yes.
Okay, next question.
I think that's right. I mean, Karl Rove lays this plan out in the Wall Street Journal in March of 2010. He makes it really clear that this is going to be the Republican play, that they are going to go into local communities and they're going to win these races, and then they're going to take chambers, and then they're going to redraw all the national lines. I don't know if the Democrats just don't read the Wall Street Journal, but it was all there in bright neon, flashing lights. The Democrats never responded. They weren't out in force raising money trying to stop this. They didn't have the imagination to come up with the idea themselves. It's a catastrophic strategic failure, and I don't think that they understand even how hard it's going to be to undo in order to stop it next time.
Well, in order to change it, I assume they would need to win back the state houses, at least the ones that are tactically important, and do it before 2020.
It's a long, long road. It's a complicated road, and they have to win on these tilted maps.
Yeah,
it's not going to be easy to do.
But do they have to win tilted maps at the state level, too, or just congressionally?
At both levels.
Oh, okay,
I mean,
so
if you look at what they've done to the maps at the state level, I mean, in North Carolina, tilted maps are the reason why you have transgender bathroom laws. I mean, you have a state like Ohio, which it's the exact same thing as what happens on a national level with aggregate votes. In Ohio, for the Ohio State House, you had more votes for Democratic candidates, but the Republicans drew themselves lines such that they took a 60-39 supermajority in the Ohio House. It's the same kind of thing in Michigan. It's the same kind of thing in Wisconsin. The Democrats are going to have to win on tilted maps before 2020 on both the state and the national level if they want to have any chance of this not happening again in 2021 and the firewall extending all the way to 2030.
Right. So, David Daley,
I sound overly dramatic, but I am not. It is just that serious.
So, David Daley, it seems to me that, the Democrats who talk about the emerging Democratic majority are kind of whistling through the graveyard, because it doesn't matter what demographic shifts are taking place if this kind of extreme gerrymandering is taking place. So in the minute or so we have left, what's the solution?
Boy, the Democrats, I don't think, can be trusted to come up with it, and let's be honest, I don't think that it's necessarily good for our politics to throw lots of more money into local races, making them more negative, nasty, and brutish than they already are. There are states that have figured out how to do nonpartisan redistricting, backed up by an independent court. I mean, Iowa has shown the way. New Jersey has a pretty good example. California's system has been effective. Whenever a referendum makes the ballot about nonpartisan redistricting, it doesn't matter if it's a red state or a blue state, if it's Arizona, California, Ohio, Florida, it does really well. It wins upward of 60% usually. People get this. I think we understand that our politics are broken and that this is a fundamental reason why, and we want our elections to matter and our votes to count, and we can't trust the politicians to draw these lines. We're the only democracy in the world that allows it to happen, and the answer to this has to come from us.
From us. Okay. We'll have to leave it there, but David Daley, author of the new book, Rat Effed, How the Democrats Won the Presidency But Lost America, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. A pleasure.